Okay. We're going to go ahead and get started, and my lovely co-programs coordinator Nicky will keep an eye on the waiting room in case we have some other people coming in. So again, thank you so much. My name is Ashley J. Hicks. I am a programs coordinator with A.R.T New York. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Physical description: I am a Black woman, a pale Black woman with albinism. I am currently wearing a tan tank top. I have very curly blonde hair, and I'm sitting in front of a tan wall or off-white wall and a window. Again, you can access the captions for today's session by clicking the CC button in your Zoom menu and clicking show subtitles. So welcome to the Equitable Casting Practices panel. So excited to have all of you here. We have a great discussion planned for today. And so how you'll be able to enjoy this experience in the best possible way for you. Just a reminder that this panel discussion is being recorded and will be shared on the A.R.T New York's YouTube page. Only the people who are spotlit will be on the recording. So if you don't want to be on the recording, please keep your camera off. After the discussion that we'll have, we will get to the Q&A section of the panel, and you can have several ways to ask any questions that you may have. You can either use the raise hand function and come on camera and we will spotlight you. We will also be keeping an eye on the chat box for any questions that might come in that way. And you also have the option of just coming on mic and bringing your question into the space that way. So you also have two ways that you can view this evening's panel. The first is in speaker view, and the second is in gallery view. And all you have to do is just go to the top right-hand corner of your Zoom screen, and it'll give you the option. So that way, if you want to just see it with one person speaking, or if you want to see all of our lovely faces at the same time, you can go to gallery view. All right, I am going to now pass it off to my lovely partner, Nicky, for an introduction of themselves.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this evening or afternoon. I'm so excited for this panel. I think this is an incredible topic, an incredible subject, and I'm so excited for our guests, our panelists, our interpreters, and our captioner, as well as Ashley and me and all of y'all folks there. So as Ashley mentioned, my name is Nicky Maggio. I'm the other program coordinator here at A.R.T New York. My pronouns are N, they or them, and a visual description of myself is I am a white trans person. I have medium blackish kind of hair to my shoulders. I have some facial hair today, and I'm wearing a black dress, and I'm sitting in front of some white walls with some art, a little bit of art you can see. So thank you. I would begin today's session by offering a land acknowledgement. I would like to take this time to acknowledge that wherever we're currently located on Turtle Island, otherwise known as North America, we are an occupied territory. A.R.T New York's membership in the 5 boroughs of New York City operates on the unceded ancestral land of the Lenape, Wappinger, Canarsie, Rockaway, and Matinecock communities. Apologize for the ambulance. I want to honor and celebrate all of these Indigenous communities, their elders past and present, as well as future generations. I want to take this time to acknowledge that after there was stolen land, there were stolen people. I want to honor the generations of displaced and enslaved people that build and continue to build the country we occupy today. Since we're gathered today in virtual space, let's also take a moment to consider the legacies of colonization embedded within the technologies, structures, and ways of thinking we use every day. We're using equipment and high-speed internet not available in many Indigenous communities. Even the technologies that are central to much of the art we make leave significant carbon footprints, contributing to changing climates that disproportionately affect Indigenous people worldwide. I invite you to join me in acknowledging all of this, as well as our shared responsibility to make good of the time and for each of us to consider our role in reconciliation, decolonization, anti-racism, and allyship. Thank you. The virtual part of that land acknowledgement was written by Adrian Wong of Spiderweb Show in Ontario, Canada. To learn more about whose land you are on, please visit native-land.ca. Ashley will drop the link in the chat. And as well, to call attention to the actions we take beyond just an acknowledgement, please visit this link that Ashley will also put in the chat from TCG on a list of Native-led movements for justice. Thank you all so much. And I'll pass it over to Ashley again to begin introductions.
Thank you so much, Nikki. All right, so this is where the fun begins. We get to introduce or have the panelists, our lovely three panelists, introduce themselves. I will ask you to do a brief personal introduction, share your name, your pronouns, the organization or multiple organizations that you were associated with, and your role. And then also please share a brief physical description. To make it easier, I'll call out who's on my screen. Tavia Jefferson, please come on down.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tavia Jefferson, pronouns she, her, hers. I am a Black woman with a short black bob, wearing a Black company, the musical jacket, against a predominantly white background with some accent pillows in the corner. I am the cultural coordinator for Company the Musical, To Kill a Mockingbird, all three companies, and Hairspray on tour. And what else was that? What else was I supposed to say?
I think that was great. We'll get to the nitty-gritty in a sec, but thank you, that was perfect. Next we have Ben Raanan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Raanan. I am, my pronouns are he, him, his. I'm coming to you from Denver, Colorado, the unceded lands of the Arapaho and the Ute. I am the artistic director of Family Theater Company, which is the longest running professional disability theater in the United States. I also run another company called Spectrum Shakespeare, which does work in Shakespeare for people with autism. I am also a disabled man. I have Erb's palsy in my left arm. I have autism. And, I didn't do my physical description, excuse me. I am a white man with a brown/gray beard and very thinning black hair that makes me very uncomfortable. I'm seated with a white creamish wall behind me and a big white light that I can't figure out how to get the natural light to stop being annoying to my left, no matter how much I try. And I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're very excited to have you. And last but certainly not least, we have Gama Valle.
Thank you. If you see me looking down, it's because I'm reading this thing. I get really nervous in this kind of event, so I have to have it written. My name is Gama Valle. My pronouns are él, him, his. I'm a casting director at Valle Casting, and also a children's author. I'm a light-skinned Puerto Rican male person in my mid-30s. I have black curly hair, not really defined here because it just looks like a blob, but down to my chin. I'm wearing a light blue short-sleeved shirt. You cannot see that, but it's a short-sleeved shirt with thin white vertical stripes. I'm sitting in front of a white wall with a small window and sort of lit with a bluish soft light. And tonight I wanted to say that, yes, I'm calling from Manhattan, the ancestral land of the Lenape, and I'm originally from Puerto Rico, which is the ancestral land of the Taínos. And I think that covers almost everything, I think. And I'm really excited to be here and get to meet all of you.
Thank you all so much for those lovely introductions. I think we're going to now pass it on to Nikki for our first question. Take it away, Nikki.
Yes. Hi, y'all. Thank you so much. So the first question we have for you tonight is for all three of you, and whoever wants to answer, come on off mic. But first, what are some ideal conditions that would make a casting process more equitable? And to go a little further into that, how does one center anti-racism, anti-ableism, and equity in our casting practices? Go ahead, Ben.
Hello. Silence makes me very uncomfortable, so if there's ever a silence, I'm just going to put my hand up, FYI. It's a great question. I think, and I'm going to speak obviously towards the disability side of the conversation today. I think there are two sort of myths that we have. One is that accessibility for the disabled community is something that should be feared. It is something that we, as the disabled community, like, don't know that we're disabled, and it's this thing that we, like, somebody tells us, hey, you're disabled, and like we're like, what? No, we know, we live with it every day. And so a lot of the times what people will do in a casting session, rather than be reactive and say, hey, I see that you signed up for an audition slot. What do you need? What can I do to make this more accessible for you? They'll talk around it. They'll go to people who are disability adjacent. They'll go to a therapist. They'll go to a parent. They'll go to people around for fear of offending or hurting, and not actually talk to the person about the skills they need. That's the first myth. The second myth is, it is your responsibility, I believe, as a casting director, as a director, to create a space that is equitable. It is not your responsibility to find out all the specific ways to do it. I'll tell a very brief story. I was going with my friend Reagan, who is in a wheelchair, to a coffee shop. And it was one of those cute little coffee shops. You go inside, you order your coffee, and then you take it outdoor to a beautiful patio. And Reagan pulled up to a door, which happens. Most buildings have doors. And it was an accessible door. Like, she just had to open it. But it was as if it was like a scene from a movie, that everyone else that, like, dropped their coffee and were, like, slow-mowing into trying to help Reagan open this door, like it was some huge thing that Reagan had never encountered a door before and did not know how to do it. In that moment, it wasn't the door that wasn't accessible. It was the space that was created by everyone else, who suddenly all eyes were on this person in a wheelchair. And so for me, the best person that can accommodate someone with a disability in an audition is that person. Your job, I believe, and my job as a casting director, as a director, as a stage manager, is to create an environment where people know that their accessibility needs are welcome and respected and would not have any possible negative consequences on whatever audition they're going to. And family, we say we're a people-first organization. We believe that the best work and the best art comes from when you put people first. And when you are sitting there and you are going, hey, what do you need to be successful? Whether you're disabled or not in this audition, that's when people are going to create the best work.
I think to just, everything been said, I think, interestingly enough, ideal conditions that would make a casting process more equitable. How does one center anti-racism, anti-ableism, and equity? It's decentering ourselves, right? I think so often in a lot of the spaces I'm finding, even in an attempt to be more equitable, even in an attempt to center anti-racism, somehow instinctually we revert back to, well, I didn't know that I was doing that wrong, or I didn't know that this person needed this from me, or I didn't know. It's like, but it's still not about you, right? And something that I deal with a lot, I manage a lot as a cultural coordinator, is mediation, conflict resolution, and communication resources in that way. And something that I come up against a lot is defensiveness, right? And fragility and shame and guilt. And Brene Brown is someone that I look to very often to as a resource as I'm guiding people through this. But that shame and guilt and all of that does nothing to serve the purpose, right? Take it off of yourself. Yeah. If this person needs, to Ben's point, if this person needs a door open and you are available, and then be the resource, but don't, like he said, I think what I felt from hearing that story are people are starting to feel guilty because they're seeing someone experiencing something that they don't have to necessarily deal with, right? So then there's this guilt that comes into play, and then they actually end up creating a more harmful environment than they needed to. And so I just wish people would really adopt a more outer perspective and consider what needs to be created as a whole, and not put themselves at the center of what that looks like. I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
I just want to add from my point of view, where companies are coming to me or coming to us to mainly cast regional theater. There's these teams that fly to New York to try to find actors for their productions. I think one of the first things that a lot of companies should do is put more resources into casting. Most of the time, and I'm talking plainly about money, like they need to put more money into the process. So we can, as casting people, as offices that have been hired as a freelancer, we can create more spaces to see more actors that usually are not allowed in the room. Most of the time, projects and processes are very rushed. Everyone wants them to get done quickly. And usually it's because they don't want to spend more money during that process. Like, for example, a more concrete example is like creating making part of the budget, having the possibility of doing a pre-screen, for example, where you can actually have a lengthier process, a lot more time, rooms, readers, to see actors who might not fit their conventional views of a role or a play in general. Because I think resources most of the time create opportunity, and to make things more equitable, you need to create more opportunities for actors. And this is all from my point of view, like doing regional work. The demographic of New York is so diverse. We have so many people coming and going. And every year you have a wave of actors that will not have the same amount of credits than actors that been in the city for longer. And creating that space for them to get to know the team, get to know the casting directors, it's one step, that concrete step that companies could take in terms of making the process a little more open and equitable. And definitely agree, like decentering ourselves is very, very important in this process, because we have to be able to not just leave the listening and learning as the phrase, but actually taking action on that. And if we are defensive, because I think that's a great word and a great topic, we won't listen and we won't learn, and we at the end won't take action to make things differently.
Oh, wow. Thank you all.
If I can just piggyback off of that, one last thing to make an ideal casting situation is to diversify the casting room. It cannot look homogenous anymore. If your casting is solely represented by cisgendered, white, and able-bodied, heterosexual, you know, then unfortunately, no one in that space will be able to speak to the needs of diverse artists who are coming into the space. And granted, you can hire someone like any one of us, right? I'm a cultural coordinator, that's part of the reason I exist, but that would still mean diversifying your team. Yeah. And if you are going to hire casting of diverse representations, make sure that they are aware that they are being placed there for their casting abilities, but also for as a sensitivity, you know, as someone to cultural sensitivities, and then compensate them accordingly, right? Make sure that you're letting them know, don't just put someone on the team because they represent a different ethnicity or sexuality or something, and then have these invisible expectations for this person, that they are not only aware of the emotional labor that they will be participating in, but also are not being compensated for what that looks like.
Yes. All very good points. Thank you. And thank you so much for bringing that in. That's really, really important. You have to diversify your casting room. Otherwise, the work will not continue. For our second question, how is your relationship to equitable casting changed? Have you always included it in your work, or has something specific caused your perspective to shift?
I think for me, it's kind of a silly question, but an important one, because for me, and especially the population that I am and the population that I work with, it's changing every single day. It's changing with every person that I meet, because every disabled person and every person in general has their own access needs. And I feel like one thing we like to do, especially within the disabled community and how our society views disability, is we like to homogenize. We go, great, I'm going to make this accessible for my autistic actors, or I might make this accessible for my wheelchair actors or my deaf actors, rather than I'm going to make this accessible for person Y who is deaf, and I'm also going to make it accessible for person X who's also deaf, but may have different ways they view their own deafness. And I think one thing theater does exceptionally well is rigidity. We love it. We're like the most abstract art form and the most rigid of processes. And when we take these mental models that we have been told are correct and necessary and the only way to do something, and we just say, but are they? Is that the only mental model that I can have? Sometimes the answer is yeah, and fantastic. A lot of the times the answer is no, and great. How can we shift that? My autism, I talk through stories a lot. So I'm going to talk through a lot of stories today. Or examples, I should say. We always talk about, if we're in an audience, the number one sin an audience member can do, we all know this, is your cell phone rings. We all know this. And then if someone's cell phone rings, we all have to stare at them. We have to shame them. We have to make sure they know that their mistake has ruined everything. But to me, that has always been something that we've just been told. If I was with all my good friends here and we were at a Starbucks, for example, there'd be cell phones going off all over the place. We as humans have selective attention. I can look at you, we can have a conversation, even though there's a cell phone going off over there. I would argue that it's not the actual cell phone noise that distracts us from whatever production we're seeing. It is the audacity of someone to break this unwritten rule. And so one thing that I have done is, in my theater, cell phones are allowed. We just say, please don't record the production. But if your cell phone goes off, or you need to send a text because you need it as an access tool, or you have a kid who you're leaving alone for the first time in your life and you're nervous and you just want to check in every 30 minutes, that's okay. And suddenly, once you give people the permission to be different, and to not go with this mental model of rigidity, suddenly it's not bothersome. And now we're all enjoying the play. All of us can sit there and join it, because theater, like audiences, at least I'll say this for family, audiences aren't coming post-pandemic. It is a real fight right now. And so anything that I can do that is going to limit an audience member going, you know, I would, except I really don't want to turn off my phone, or I really don't want to have that snack, or what happens if I get confused in the play, or I have to sneeze, oh, I don't want to be that. I need to take those away. Yeah, accessibility isn't about only being a good person. It's all about creating an environment where our theater and our art can flourish in the most exciting ways. You know, the best stories are one that include everyone. The best casts are the ones that include every perspective. It's not just about being a good person. It's about doing the best art, in my opinion.
For me, I've been doing casting for 5 years now, like concentrating in casting. But before that, I was a director. I went to New School to be a big director, and I was doing the freelance thing in New York City. But in the process of like changing from hustling to be a director, to be in the the comfort of an office, where everything sort of starts becoming the same process. It's over and over again. And when you start as an assistant, you start seeing things, but you're like, what should I do? How can I make change? How can I further things in the casting industry? So what it's changed for me throughout the years in terms of casting and making it equitable, and it's learning how to speak up and realizing that me being in the room, it's already important. Like having someone, my voice there is already important. And it creates change. And then the next step is speaking up and not being afraid of the structures in place. When you're in this kind of office, you get a artistic team that's very rigid. Most of them are very, very rigid. They want a process to be always how it's been done for years, how they know it, what's comfortable. So really taking a step forward and pushing things further is trying to break away from those structures and the conventional ideas on how a casting process should happen and should be. And also like understanding the worth of your experience and your point of view. And I think that's how my relationship to casting has changed as I've been able to be in the room more. And I have to admit, as I've gained power in the room. Because when you're an assistant, for example, you have a little power. You can talk to your boss. You can say, hey, I thought we could do this differently. I think we should talk directly to that artistic member and see if we can approach this process in a different way. But as I've grown in the industry and the profession, I just have to remind myself that my opinions and my point of view are worthy of being spoken. And I think that's sort of what actually changed in terms of how I approach casting. I've always, because who I am and where I come from and just working as a freelance director, I always looked for different ways to bring different people to enrich my experience in my work. But now it's changed because of the gain of power in the room.
as far as my relationship, prior to the pandemic, I was primarily a performer. I was an actress and was only in a few spaces as assistant director and on the other side of the table. And I built cultural coordinating after the execution of George Floyd as an answer to what I was hearing the summer of 2020 after We See You What and hashtag Broadway is racist and all of these things. And I took my 20 plus years in the theater industry and my degree in communication and all of the different spaces I had been in and combined them into something akin to intimacy coordinating that created boundaries and language and a resource for the artists in these potentially harmful spaces. What's been interesting now being on the other side of the table and, like Gama was saying, having more power, I guess, is recognizing the way that things were harmful before the pandemic, right? Even as a Black actress, things that were microaggressive and clearly biased and inequitable for me that I kind of just brushed off, that I, didn't feel like I had the agency to speak up about. And it's been really, really fascinating and empowering for me to be in a space where I can look at the casting associate or the casting director or even the actual director and say, and pull them aside respectfully, but say, yeah, no, we can't say that, or that was inappropriate, or you crossed a boundary. And be the resource for artists like myself who don't feel like they can speak up because of the power dynamic. And so it's just been really gratifying. But what I've also really appreciated are the ways in which productions and organizations are even ahead of me. By the time I arrive, they've already put non-binary practices in place. They've already made the room accessible. They've already, and so by the time I arrive, I'm kind of just there to observe and to maintain. But it's been really, really wonderful to see the ways in which people are doing the work on their own.
That's all really beautiful. I have a follow-up question because each of you mentioned it in some way. So I apologize. This was not on your prepared sheet, but I'm just curious for anyone who wants to answer. One of you mentioned about rigidity and how things have always been done and pushing back and using your voice. In each of your experiences, have you experienced a lot of or any pushback, and how that has gone when you go into these rooms to cast for someone, or when you are the cultural coordinator, or when you're casting for your own thing, and it's like trying to create a space that is more equitable, and the experience of maybe people not wanting to progress?
If I may, yes, right. For every 3 productions I have who are doing the work, there's going to be at least one who's a bit resistant, who thinks that they're doing the work and don't recognize the ways in which they are participating in white dominant cultural standards, i.e. perfectionism, i.e. Capitalism, right? Because at the end of the day, like Gama said, it's about money. And that's something that I am trying to reconcile as I'm doing this work, is for all of the general managers and directors. I think at one point in January, I was working on 5 different productions at one time. And I was experiencing, for all of the work that I was doing on an artistic with the artists, I still had to have conversations about, well, yeah, but we have to sell tickets, right? That's the feedback I'm getting, is we have to sell tickets. And even there was some people, I won't name productions, but there was a production that I'm not associated with that got canceled last week. It's closing months early, and I was very upset because it got fantastic reviews, and today it got several nominations. And everyone was like, yes, but it wasn't selling. And I said, and it was a primarily Black cast. And I was so frustrated because I'm like, we didn't learn anything. We didn't learn anything, right? Because the whole point of what we did over the last 2 years was that inclusion and representation was going to take effort. And you can't market a show of a diverse representation the same way you're going to do one of just 2 white people, right? Like with celebrities and stardom, it's going to look differently. It's going to look different. And we have to give space to that if we're really about this work. If we're really about providing access, if we're really about representation, you have to play the long game. And it's not going to happen overnight. And that's something that I'm struggling with, is like, just give it time. Yes, continue to give money, recognize that the return is not going to be exactly the same, but just have patience. So yes.
If I can jump off of that, there's an amazing points to everything you said. And
Thank you.
In that production next week, and I'm very, very excited. I think I'm seeing that one. It's so before I became I'm relatively new to becoming Family's artistic director. And before that, I was a director in Chicago, as well as a disability advocate. Once again, only directing disabled plays, but as a freelancer. And I would get invited to all of these meetings that people would just, like, big theater companies would be like, you're the person we need to go. And I'd be so excited. I'm like, oh my God, I was young. I'm too early for this, which is another white supremacist colonial idea of, even though you're talented, you're too young. You got to pay your dues first. But I was so excited, and I go to so many of these meetings, and I would lay out all of these plans, because they'd say, we want to make an accessible theater. We want to be inclusion. We want to do all these things. We want to do this and this. And I would put in so many hours into an interview, it would seem, talking about all the things I could help them do. And then I wouldn't hear anything for 5 weeks. I'd check in, and they'd say, we just don't have the money for it. And what's interesting when it comes to accessibility, once again, there's this myth. I don't know why I'm on myths today, but I'm on this myth kick, that accessibility must be expensive. Like, I get it. Yeah, you are a theater that you decided 50 years ago to build stairs instead of ramps, and now you're like, man, that sucks. But you don't have $1 million to fund into that product for next season. You just don't have it. I get that. Okay. However, just because you can't do the most doesn't mean that you shouldn't do the least. You know, I do this YouTube series with Ideas Stages about accessible DIY. That's like, great. What things can you do to make your theater more accessible for $50 or less? You know, and I have sensory boxes of like, hey, welcoming in people with ADHD and autism, that is a one-time investment of $50 that somebody can just rent from your theater. You know, things like, hey, I can start putting image descriptions on everything I post. It's going to take at first an extra 5 minutes, and then you're going to get in the hang of it, and it's going to be second nature, and it's going to take 3 seconds. You can start every meeting with a visual description, which, even if no one needs the visual description, just by the fact of you are starting that visual description lets people know that are listening, hey, they actually do care about accessibility here. And if I need something, they're probably going to be super, super receptive to it. At Family, we caption every one of our plays. Every single one is captioned. A third are live captioned. We don't have the money to do every single performance live captioned, but we do have PowerPoint, and we have a projector we bought once, and we closed caption every single performance. You know, it was a one-time investment that, honestly, most theaters, you probably have a projector. I shouldn't say that. Most bigger theaters probably have some projector that they can do, and it helps everyone. It doesn't just make it accessible to people who are deaf or hard of hearing. It is someone who is older. It is someone who zoned out for a second and was like, wait, what's going on in this play? I need help. And so I think what you were saying earlier about like, it's all about the money. It's all about the money. It is all about the money, especially when it comes to accessibility, but only if we make it about the money. You know, people in, I say ramps because that's the big one that every artistic director that I worked with was like, but we can't put in a ramp. And I was like, I never asked for that. What? People in wheelchairs have gone to places where there are no ramps before. This is not brand new. You did not, it's not something that's going to like blow their mind. It's giving space and saying, hey, we don't have this problem. Do you have a solution? You know, if we're talking about a casting thing, you know, great. I can't bring you into the room we're going to normally do. Can we do this audition somewhere else? And I'll make myself available. Can we move the whole audition to somewhere else? I'm sure you can pull in a favor and find a room on first floor sometimes. Yeah. So it's all about the money, but only if we make it all about the money.
I think just something that I want to share is like coming from the pandemic, throughout the pandemic, we realized that even for theater, doing tapes as a first round of auditions opened the door for so many people. And yes, not everyone has access to a great camera or lighting equipment, but it does, in one side, opens the door to see so many actors that usually won't get an appointment because, you know, they give you 2 days with certain amount of hours and you don't have the space to invite everyone to audition. It's humanly impossible. But with tapes or virtually or a virtual process, you can get to see way more people, and the surprises we got through the process, seeing actors that we never thought this person would be like the right fit for this character, but now we have the proof. We can show you this person can do it. And I recognize that also, like being in person, it's better for some people, it's easier for some people. But we've tried to create a hybrid process where we can give the option to everyone. Do you want to tape? Do you want to be seen virtually? Do you want to come in person? And you'll be surprised how many companies are like, no, like the pandemic is over. We have to do it all in person. I'm tired of being sitting in front of the Zoom. I'm tired of watching videos, and it doesn't take that long. We're talking about 3-minute long videos that you can like watch and then decide if you want to see more of that person. So something that actually doesn't cost extra money, which is being open and available to watch tapes, to be sitting in front of a computer and just be open to new actors, has been a controversial topic in this process after the pandemic. It's like how you know, we're limiting ourselves going back to the room or just the room, because then we fall back into calling in the same people over and over again. And and sometimes our office it's a little guilty of that. So all of a sudden you start recycling some lists because it's an easier way to approach the process. And then you have to stop yourself. It's like, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this? I have to go back and add more names and look in other places. But that's like the most concrete example that I've seen coming out of the pandemic, and just sort of taking in everything that we've learned. It's been interesting, those conversations.
Can I jump in for a moment? I'm so glad you brought in about time and the time we give people to approach an audition. I think you said 2 days. So the best actress I know, just unbelievable actress, has dyslexia, and it's not something, and pretty severe dyslexia. And she doesn't say it out loud because in America, like, people love to be the judge, jury, and executioner about people's issues of like, no, you're not disabled. You're only disabled if blank. And I'm trying to talk to her and tell her you need to advocate for your needs, where she'll get an audition notice 2 days before, and she can't read off a paper at all. It's going to take her more time to learn the lines ahead of time because she has to get her partner, who is very patient, to literally read all the lines. Then once she's cast in the show, she can't even do the normal, I have a copy of Every Brilliant Thing. She can't do the normal thing of like, great, I'm in rehearsal and I'm doing my thing. She memorizes all the lines ahead of time. But then this is how messed up our American theater is. She still holds her book and pretends as if she's reading because she doesn't want anyone to think differently of her because she came in off book because of her dyslexia. And so I think it's really important that time, like as an artistic director, my season's planned months in advance. I don't know why we suddenly want to do this weird time thing where we're like, great, we're going to put the audition notice out. It's going to be 3 days. And like, is this some sort of test for actors? It's confusing to me. Like what? I have a belief.
6 songs and 2 sides. Like,
yeah.
Like all this material to learn.
Right. And you need to see it, whatever. I'm not even going to argue that point, but then give people time to actually learn it in whatever access need they need to do, in the same way as once they're cast in the production or the film, they're going to get time to work on it, right? Like that's what rehearsal is. So, yeah.
Can I clarify just one thing? There's those projects that happen that quickly. It happens, but most projects come in with at least a month in advance. And I usually send out appointments at least a week and a half or 2 weeks before the day we see people, so they have enough time to learn. But I also want to clarify that when I said about the 2 days, it's like they give us 2 days to see people. Like you have those 2 days to see people in person. And that, you could see 80 possibly. And that's usually in a play, there's a couple of characters. It's not quite enough to really explore the amount of talent in New York and outside New York as well. But yes, those projects that want to happen, that they need to happen in 3 days also come our way sometimes, and those are terrible. There's very not fair to anyone in the process.
I think it might be more of a regional theater thing, honestly, is like we're going to cast it, and then we're going to cast it. We're going to put out an audition notice in 2 days. We're going to cast it as some test of like, you're not a New York actor, so can you act? I don't know.
They do that here too, though. They do that here too. And I mean, it may be the rare, immediate replacement situation, but they'll send you all of the material. And I think it's worth considering, and kind of going back to what you were saying about the taped auditions, I think it's worth considering if I'm sending in 6 scenes in 2 songs, are you actually going to watch all of them? Do you need all of this material? And who is it serving for you to have me learn all of this, film all of this, when in reality, my experience as a caster, the very little I've had, is y'all listen to 30 seconds of it before it's like, yeah, bring them in. Or, and so it's like, is this doing everyone a disservice by requiring all this material? And like you said, Ben, it feels like a test, right? And like you said, Gama, it doesn't serve anyone in the process, it doesn't seem like. And that's just something to consider, I guess.
I'm gonna blend these last two questions a little bit, just because y'all are fabulous and have went into them already, which is really great. This has been so engaging. I'm so happy. But yeah, one of the things that we wanted to bring up in this conversation is kind of that switch that Gama, you mentioned about going from being in person in the pandemic and having this virtual sort of process. And now we're seeing kind of more of like a hybrid, leaning more into a hybrid process of casting. And so we'd love to hear about what you have found in your different roles as a culture coordinator, as an actor and performer, as a director, artistic director, as a casting director, what you found to be easier in a virtual setting, and what discoveries you would like to bring into in-person casting from these lessons you learned. And the other thing I would just want to throw in there is also I'd love to talk about preparation a little bit. So we're looking at some tangible preparation stuff and then wider value things as well.
I can speak on the virtual part because we did it live. We still do it the hybrid process, and we're still trying to figure out ways on how to keep that working for everyone involved. I know a lot of that, like in terms of, I know some actors say I don't like it because I have to edit light and do the sound of my own audition. Some others say, it's great. I can audition for 3 things the same night and then be done with it. And a lot of people say, I've been getting auditions to things that I didn't get auditions for before the pandemic, and everyone realized, actually, we can do this through the computer. And also seeing a lot more people from out of town. So I think, it works differently for everyone. And I think that's why coming out of the pandemic, which I don't think we're out of it, but, in this moment in time where we are right now, we should definitely try to remember what we learned and try to create different hybrid options so people can still have access to these auditions and different projects. And in terms of preparation, I think one thing is, can you clarify in terms of the preparation, what is the focus on this question?
Yeah, we'd love to hear like physical, like also preparations, like how sides are given out or how the material is being emailed and how time is being managed and how that relates to the equitable processes that we want to continue.
Oh yeah, also like through the pandemic, just because it turned our attention into technology and how it could be used. Like, for example, before the pandemic, we would rely a lot on Sites Express, which is a service that you have to pay for, that most of the time only agents and managers have access to. Some actors have access to it, but they have to pay for that service. But then throughout the pandemic, we realized, well, actually, I can send a Dropbox link, for example. I can have a Google Drive file folder, where I can have all the materials available and be accessible there and can be downloadable as well. So if you have access to internet once, you can download all the material, you can have it offline in any device that you have available to you. So I think that's changed a little bit because now you want to make sure that everything that pertains to the audition process, you can share virtually as well. It's not like before where, even when I started 5 years ago, everything we would, scan things, but most of the time you would have like a paper, like actual physical copies of things, and you wouldn't have. most people wouldn't even think about opening a link or sharing a link where people could get access to these materials. So I think that's something that's changed in terms of the preparation. Also, I think a lot of people are moving to try to have Word documents when possible, so they can be, changed in terms of format, font, size. But it's a slower process there. It's still a lot of PDFs and copies of the script, which makes things very difficult. So I find myself enlarging pages because sometimes they send you, the little square. But definitely that's something that also it's changing in terms of like how to make sites truly malleable, so people can adapt them to their needs.
Can I jump off in that and say, not just like, to me, that is the most important thing. And what I was going to say is, please send your sides in Word. No one, I was doing a panel for the Dramatists Guild and got in trouble by some big, famous, important playwright because I said, please send your sides in words. No one's going to change the words. They know you have the side too. The casting will know if you're just making up your own thing. If you scan a script in, like on a scanner, a screen reader will not read that. It will not pick it up. It allows people to, exactly what you said, change the font, change the style, change the color of the text if there's someone that needs more brightness. When they're doing the actual production, they're not going to have the script in their hands. So let them change the script however they need to change the script so they can give you the best performance that they possibly can. Because the last thing you want when someone's casting is like, great, they're a fabulous actor, but like, am I going to not cast somebody because the script was too small on something they're going to memorize anyways? So please, please, please send your scripts in Word and type them out if you can.
I will jump in. I'm thinking more on the preparation side than the virtual aspect, just on how to continue to create an equitable space from the jump. I think being very clear about who you're asking to come into the space, and again, decentering yourself enough to be mindful of what that space needs to look like once this person arrives. If that means, I really like this transition that we're doing to non-binary dance spaces, right? And if for whatever reason there is a binary requirement, being articulating that early on, saying something like masculine presenting or feminine presenting, so people are aware of what's being asked of them in the space and what is required, so there's not discrimination there. Again, I said it before, but having a diverse casting space, something I did with Mockingbird, Tom Robinson, the Black character in Mockingbird, has to give his statement, and a couple of times the N word is used, and this is the material that we use for the audition because it's his big chunk. And so we say in the breakdown, or when we send the sides, we recognize that there is sensitive material in this. If you don't want to say this word, we understand, please let us know and we will adjust accordingly. The reader, even though it says that Atticus Finch, the white presenting person, says this in the script, the reader will not be saying this in the audition room because there's no need. So we make those adjustments. And then we also make sure that there's a person of color in the space. So if and when a Black person has to use the N word, they're not saying it in a room full of white people, right? And so it's just those things that I know that we haven't really considered before, but they make such a difference. And I think the concern always is like, if you do this, then it's going to obstruct the artistic abilities. In reality, the safety that is felt from that type of disclosure allows the artist to be that much more engaged, right? And it allows them to be that much more free with their artistry, and it allows for a deeper value of that. And then, of course, you know, their ability to reach a vulnerable space with the production team for all of the ways that that is valuable, right? Yeah, I think that was it. So just building a space, really being mindful to intentionally build what that should look like.
Oh, wow. Thank you. On this recording, you'll probably see me nodding a lot because I'm just picking bits and pieces where I'm like, oh, as an actor, I feel that. And also as a disabled actor, I feel that, how many times I've had to retype my scripts because they weren't in the correct format. But you all actually answered a lot of the other questions that we had in many of your answers. So awesome. So we're now going to move on to the Q&A portion of the panel. So for any of our attendees who have any questions that they'd like to ask our three panelists, you can either type them in the chat, you can use the raise your hand function, you can come on mic and ask your question. All right, we got one, and I think it's in the chat, but I'm going to read it out loud. I'm curious how you connect with your actual artists. How do you make sure artists are finding you and you are finding them?
So for the disabled community, there's a lot of mistrust within the disabled community of artistic institutions. We still, half the disabled roles that we cast are played by non-disabled actors. Why not? The public decides to do Richard III with a non-disabled actor. That's a question. And so there's a lot of deep, intense mistrust that just putting out a casting notice is not going to do the thing. What I suggest is finding advocates in your community or in other communities that you want to be associated with who can help point you in that right direction. I'll say a controversial statement, which is the disability community is so underrepresented on our stage in terms of advocates and allies that for me, as someone who considers myself a disabled man and a disabled philosopher, like, I'm not yet at the point where I can put my own emotional labor first. We haven't gotten to that space yet where I can go, oh no, I'm too busy for that. I can't help you cast that thing. Because 99% of the time, if I say, no, I can't help you cast that thing, that means they're not going to cast it with a disabled actor. They're going to put in another actor. And yes, that is if you are doing the cost of living, but that's also if you're doing Oedipus and you have Tiresias, who is a blind character, who was written to be a blind person. And so for me, I think the way to connect with actual artists is to find a champion within that community who cares, who knows, and who you have proven that this is actually important to you. That you are doing this because you believe the best Tiresias is going to be one who's authentically blind and not one who you're like, haha, no newspaper articles are going to be written about me. No Facebook posts are going to be put about me because I did this. When it comes to just saying, here is a thing, please come to it, very rarely is it going to work.
Yeah, I agree completely in terms of outreaching and reaching out to advocates and organizations around your area and in your community. There's sometimes so you get a project, you're like, where am I going to find these actors? Are they only going to come through submissions from agents and managers, or I'm going to put in the work and send random emails to people saying, I'm casting this, can you help me? Can you direct me to where I can find these actors? Can you send me any names that you have? Because it's easier to just lay back and say, we didn't get any submissions. No agents and managers have these clients. We need to find another way to cast this role. But definitely taking the time out of your day to really find those emails, send a message, and follow up with these people that are really busy, and they're like, what is this casting director writing me for? So they can see that you're actually interested in these actors, not just to say, I sent you the email, but I'm actually interested in seeing them and bringing them into the virtual or the actual room. So that's one of the ways that we do, and we try to get in touch with, get to know more artists and sort of relate to them. I think we also try to have as a very transparent website and social media outlets, like posting our breakdowns. They're all there, like fully in display. You get to know who I am, who's Harriet. You get to interact with whatever sort of content we're putting out there. That's one of the ways where we stay in touch with people, and also, like, for example, one of the few offices where we put our breakdown on social media, like we actually put the link so people can click on it, look at it, and send their materials to us if they feel like there could be a good fit for the project. Because there's no reason, and that's something that I learned starting to work with Harry. It's like there's no reason to hide what you're working on. There's absolutely no reason. Maybe TV, because you have to be so secretive, like no one can know what the project is, no one can know what the script is. But I do theater, and most of the plays are known. There's nothing to hide. So there's no reason to hide the material, how much is like the pay, and the language that's being used in every breakdown. So those are like the basic ways where we try to stay in touch with the artists. And just trying to be open, like open doors, open email, truly.
And also, if you're looking to cast a specific population that has traditionally been shut out of theater, know that those actors probably have moved to where the work is. So, for example, everyone loves to do no one loves to do it. Everyone loves to want to do The Cost of Living by Martina Mayak. And they're like, but there's no actors to do this. There's no actors to do this thing. There are actors. They're all in Denver because that's where the disabled theater companies are. We have 3 here. So know that if you want to do this thing, that's going to mean travel, that's going to mean hotel, but that's also going to mean like taking apart the kind of theater biases that we have right now, that like all good acting comes from New York or Chicago or LA or Atlanta, and know that like there are really great, I will say this only from the disabled because that's what I'm going to speak of. There's great disabled actors here and in Portland and in Minneapolis are the 3 hot spots. But if you're not going to call those theater companies, you're going to think it's a scarcity model, and it's not.
Thank you. And I know, Tavia, you do cultural coordination, I think I know it's in a different way, but how for equitable casting, or just, like being in the room for those projects that are going to require that type of reframing, how would you say, people, theater companies and artistic directors and directors should reach out to people like you, who I also know it's a very new role. It's very brand new. So how would they go about getting in contact with someone like you, or how do you go about getting in contact with theaters and artistic directors?
Yeah. I mean, and I agree with everything that they said. What's the saying? To get something you've never gotten, you have to do something you've never done, which means we've been doing casting one way for a very long time, and we've been getting the same product. It's time to get something new, but that means expanding your reach, expanding where you're looking, expanding how you're looking. It's not just going to come from Actors Access and playbill.com anymore. Like, you have to change, because I think what Ben said about a distrust now of the industry is so important to recognize, because there are sects of marginalized communities who no longer feel like there is a space for them, and have moved to spaces where there is room and opportunities for growth. And they're so incredibly talented, and they're exactly what needs to be in Richard III. They're exactly what, they're exactly what we're looking for. We just didn't know, because we've been ignoring them for all this time. And then as far as finding someone who works like me, I think it's beautiful that there have been a bevy of sensitivity specialists, cultural coordinators, intimacy coordinators, all kinds of artists and communication specialists and human resource specialists, and just coming into this work as a resource. I know I'm currently training other cultural coordinators, and to define, I don't think I ever did, cultural coordinating, as I tell everyone, I made it up. I made it up over the pandemic. And again, it was a conglomeration of just 20 plus years in the theater industry and all of the things. But a cultural coordinator is an assigned essential role within an entertainment production that operates to serve as an advocate, educator, liaison, and or mediator to ensure cultural equality throughout each stage of the artistic process. I know that's a lot of buzzwords, but what I had recognized were that, especially based on the power dynamics, there was a dominant group that didn't know how to speak to the non-dominant group. And they both had something that the other needed, right? And so how do we allow for that intersectionality? How do we allow for that cross communication? How do we allow there to be sort of a horizontal hierarchy? Who can be that liaison to bridge that gap? And so one thing that I'm actually even looking into is there someone already existing in these productions or these organizations that wants to do this work, that could do this work, that could be compensated to do this work? Can I train them, right? And I think I wrote this down, what Ben said, just because you can't do the most doesn't mean you can't do the least, right? So even if you can't hire me in my entirety or someone like me, you may have someone on your staff who identifies as a person of color, or as deaf or hard of hearing, or as transgender or something, who wants to be an advocate for their community, right? And again, if aware of the task that they're taking on, would gladly do that. And so right now I'm just working on trying to train more people to do this work, because I always have to say it's not enough just to be a person of color, right? Like, just because you're a person of color doesn't mean you're ready to go into this work. Just because you're a person with access needs does not mean that you're ready to be the beacon of truth for all people who have that need. There are a lot of other skills that go into that, but I think that more than likely there are several people that probably already exist within the institution who are capable of taking on this work.
And it's not, we look so much right now in terms of we don't want to do harm, rightfully so. But what that sometimes leads to is we don't actually do the thing because we're afraid doing the thing will cause harm, which probably causes more harm. Like, I would much rather someone make a mistake than not, and we can talk about it and we can have a conversation. I believe in people. Like, that's why I do the work I do. I believe that people are inherently good. Even the shittiest people, I do believe there is goodness inside of them that's just been masked. But if you don't try or you don't put it out there, that's the real concern. I had another meeting I have lots of meetings about Richard III. Lots of meetings. It's very exciting. People are like, oh my gosh, he's disabled. I had no idea. It's very exciting. And it was for an outdoor theater, and they were like, okay, we're going to cast Richard III as a woman. And I was like, wow, mind blown. And they're like, we're going to cast Richard III, get this, actually disabled. And I was like, wow, mind blown again. And they were like, we have one question for you. And I was like, what can I help you with? And they're like, what if there's mud? And I was like, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, we're an outdoor theater. What happens if there's mud and then their wheelchair gets stuck and then they're stuck? Was the only question this artistic director had. Which, first of all, I was like, well, not all disabled people are in wheelchairs. First of all, if you're really concerned about your mud, I don't know how much mud you have where you are at, then may I suggest casting someone with a limb difference or who is deaf. But disabled people, we've worked with mud. People in wheelchairs have gone through mud before. We'll be okay. Also, may I suggest a board? Like, just putting a board down. And it's this type of thing, though, that when I'm talking to people and I'm kind of answering these silly questions, and I know I'm making fun of this kind of right now, but everyone has those questions about disability, especially. I'm not going to speak for any of the other groups represented here, but like questions we have had in our head, but we are concerned to ask because we are scared we're going to offend. And the last thing I can do in that moment is the last thing I should do is go make this other person who is trying to put a disabled actor on stage who is very concerned about mud. Once again, I don't know how much mud they have in their space. The last thing I should do is go make him feel bad, which makes him go, I should not ask questions. This is a terrible idea. I should keep the practice that half the theaters in America are doing right now. Most theaters are doing a non-disabled Richard III. If we want that change, then we have to assume love and practice grace is what I believe in my community. And once again, I'm only speaking for me and the way I look at it, because I know a lot of people disagree and they say, no, significant harm is done. I need to be able to speak my voice. So I'm speaking right now only for myself and my disabled community.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And that it kind of goes back to, I've had some inquiries from people being like, oh my gosh, when you do cultural coordinating training, tell me, I really want to be a cultural coordinator. And I'm looking at them like, you probably shouldn't be, because I had to ask someone, I was having a conversation with an artist and they had said something to the effect of, yeah, so-and-so did this thing and I just haven't seen them be cut down to size. And I said, okay, well, are you looking for revenge or resolve? Because I'm not in the business of revenge. That's not what the purpose of anything that I do is. It's mediation. It's coming to a resolution, but not to make people feel bad. And it's funny, again, going back to the whole guilt and shame, and I say this in my trainings all the time, you can't be so scared to get it wrong that you don't move. Because when you stop moving, you can't grow. you can't learn. I'll be the first, I've got 36 years of experience as a Black woman, but I am very much still learning about sexual identity and you know, how everyone identifies and how to get that right. And please understand that I have made mistakes, and it's scary, and I have to tell my own self, like, don't sit in the shame, apologize, let it go and move on, do better the next time. And I can honestly say I've been proud of how I'm getting better at just practicing that in all of my spaces. And still recognizing that I'm going to make mistakes. You were saying about casting, I had a production that wanted a swing, but they wanted a swing of color. And they were so confused about how to find someone with a specific ability level, right? Because swinging is hard work. I'll be the first to say swinging is tough. And they're like, how do we find a swing that's strong? I said, well, how do all of the white people that you have on that roster, how did they get strong? How do swings get better? They just got to get the work, right? They didn't just come out of school. I mean, even if they did go to a wonderful PWI, musical theater institution, they still had to learn to swing. So you have to give them a chance to swing. In addition, have you gone to find out who was swinging at Ain't Too Proud, who was swinging at On Your Feet, who was swinging at Allegiance or Miss Saigon? Because those are people of color and they know what it is to swing as well. And when I said that, it was just like, oh, right. It's one of those things where it's like, I'm not going to shame you. I don't want to make you feel bad. And I talk about it funny now, but it's one of those things, like, again, decentering ourselves. Yeah. Looking outside of the scope of what it is we've always known and expanding our minds to something. There's so much more. There's so much more available.
Yeah, I think in my experience, thinking about when people face questions regarding, can we cast someone in this role because we see these red flags, or we have this, not red flags, but we have these questions that we've never asked, that we don't know the answer to. Is that, can those questions wait? And can you focus on the talent and how these people perform, what they bring to the material? And then when you're convinced, when you're fully aware that this person is the right person, sit down with your team and say, these are the challenges that we have. How do we face them? And are we willing to make the changes and put the effort that needs to be put into this to have this performer be part of our company? I think it's because it's happened with, I was casting a musical, it was Matilda, and they were like, oh my God, the best actor was an actor of color for Matilda. Absolutely. Everyone loved her. But everyone was like, oh, we're going to put this girl with white parents, they're abusive, that say out loud that they don't love her, they don't like her. And I was like, what is the concern here? It's the concern what you're saying about white people, or it's the concern about the harm you probably could do to this girl. But it's like, what is the greater harm? Take the opportunity away from her and build her resume and have the experience to play a role that she's verbally said, I love this play. She understands the play, she understands the story, and she loves what it entails. So it was a long conversation, and that is like, are you gonna let this fear stop you from giving this opportunity, or are you gonna go all the way, cast a person that needs to play this role in this specific production and work around her needs and put the effort to make this production and the visuals you're sending, the visual messages you're sending work for your audience and for the actors playing in this production. So I think it's from the point of view of the casting director, is always just bringing the team to a stop for a moment and say, don't let fear stop you from opening these opportunities and actually do something that's actually action, something that visually, because theater is a lot of optics, because people are seeing people on stage. This is important. So I think it's that those conversations are always interesting and hard, but they're fruitful at the end of the process if you decide to really to have that agency throughout the process.
Thank you all so much. This was such a fruitful, incredible conversation. I have taken so much away from this. Space, decentering, time, needs, connection, conversation, bravery. I'm just so happy we did this. And I'm so happy. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Gama. Thank you, Tavia. You are all amazing. Thank you, Emilio. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, our amazing captioner, Karen. And thank you for all who have attended. This will eventually come up on our YouTube site. We're hoping to do that in the next couple months or stuff. Ashley and I are going to play with that. And I hope you all enjoyed the rest of your Monday evening and that this weather continues to be beautiful.